Hello, good afternoon. Welcome back to KXAN Live. I'm your anchor, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have our Nick's First Warning Weather segment with meteorologist Nick Bannin. Nick, how are you doing today?
Great weather. I know we need the rain. We got to preface it with that. But sunshine, low humidity, nice little breeze. Pretty nice outside here today. Great weather for doing things out of work, too. Once work's done, now that we get that extra hour of light in the evening, allows you to take advantage of this type of weather a little bit more.
Yeah, taking a walk after work once you've gotten home without the sun already down and the skies being really dark is really, really nice. It feels really good.
Yeah, I tell you, though, as a dad who has to take their kids to school early in the morning, and the deadline to be at school is before the sun is up, it's the last couple of mornings have been tough to just get yourself out of bed. What is this? Why is the alarm going off? It's still dark. And then why am I driving in the dark to work to school? So, there's two sides, right?
Yeah, resetting your brain to be you need to wake up even though the sun's not out is pretty tough.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about 90-degree weather days, which a lot of people have been dreading. Some people are waiting for. What can you tell us about the next 90 degrees here in Austin?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about that coming later on this week, the first 90s of the year. But we also wanted to dig into the freezes because yesterday morning we actually had some parts of Central Texas freeze. We did not freeze in Austin and Camp Mabry. At the airport, we got close. We got down to 33. But we've had 16 freezes this winter, or basically since November and into the early spring. We haven't really had any since officially meteorological spring began. But still, we've had more freezes this past winter than a typical winter where we typically get 12. I know a lot of people wondering, though, after that freeze in parts of the area yesterday, whether we're done with freezes for the year or not. Now, typically, the final freeze in Austin at Camp Mabry is mid-February, so 23 going on 24 days ago. So you would think, based on the average final freeze in Austin, that we were done, although we have had freezes come even into April. Look at the Hill Country. The average final freeze date there is actually another 9 days from now. So I wouldn't say that you're clear of freezes yet in the Hill Country. Probably the metro and our eastern counties are, though, especially based on the forecast that we're looking at right now. But in the Hill Country especially, I wouldn't be planting those non-native plants just yet. Typically, native plants do okay in freezes because they're used to our climate here in Central Texas, which occasionally freezes during the wintertime. But those non-native plants may not be ready for cold. Here is when we've had our recent final freezes of the last 4 winters. So last year, our final freeze of the winter was January 20th. The winter of 22-23, our final freeze was February 18th. But in 2022, our final freeze of that winter / early spring was tomorrow. Back in 2022, so March 12th. So in the last 5 years, 4 of the last 5 years have had freezes before now, and the final freeze before now. But back in winter of 2021, 2022, we had still some freezes left to go before that final freeze of the season. And this is for Austin's Camp Mabry. So you can just imagine that the Hill Country still had freezes going on even later than that. Look at these latest freezes on record, Esme, because on 3 separate occasions, 3 different years had freezes well into April. 1914 had a freeze on April 9th. That was the latest freeze of the winter-spring period in Austin area history. April 2nd of 1924, we had a freeze. April 1st of 1926, that was no April Fool's prank back then. There was a freeze. We have not had freezes that late recently, though, but back in the 19-teens and 1920s, we did. But as far as our forecast goes, plenty of heat over the next week, and we're not forecasting any freezes over the next week. And of course, the later we go into March, the more and more unlikely it is that we get additional freezes. But remember, we had some yesterday. So in the Hill Country especially, not out of the woods yet. But look at that there, Esme. On Thursday, 91. And even tomorrow and Friday, very close to
pretty
90s.
warm. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Well, you touched a little bit on the last freezes in the past years, but when was the earliest we saw a 90-degree day in the year alone?
Yeah, so we've had them very early in the year. I think even in January we've had some 90s. But the average first 90-degree day is actually not until April 3rd in Austin at Camp Mabry. So if we're speaking of averages, and of course the weather doesn't always work around averages, right? But if we're focusing on the average first 90-degree day in Austin, this is 30-year average data from 1991 to 2020. The average first 90-degree day during that period, April 3rd, which means that if we were to get a 90-degree day tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday, then we're running roughly 2.5, maybe 3 weeks earlier than normal for that first 90-degree day if we were to get one this week. So 3 weeks earlier than normal is significantly earlier than normal. It's not outrageously earlier than normal, but it is earlier than we should have had. Of the last few years, here are the dates that we've had our first 90-degree day of the year. Last year, we had already had a 90 by now, March 5th. The year before, we had it even earlier, February 22nd. Back in 2022, it was March 26th, so a little after now. And then 2021 had a not very late, but a later than average first 90-degree day of the year. But that was the only only year in the last 5 years that we've had our first 90-degree day of the year coming late. 4 of the last 5 years have had that first 90-degree day coming earlier. And in fact, on our blog that we'll talk about here in a little bit, I dug into the history of the first 90-degree day of the year and how with our warming climate, we're starting to see those first 90s coming earlier. And we're also seeing more 90-degree days each year too, because the average number of 90-degree days now every year in Austin at Camp Mabry is 123. That's roughly a third of the year in Austin has highs of 90 or hotter. And of course, some of those days are the triple-digit days. So we get a lot of these 90s. It's certainly nice, the stretch of weather that we can have without 90s. Our last 90-degree day in Austin came just before Halloween, October 30th.
October 30th was the last time we felt a 90-degree day here.
In Austin at Camp Mabry, yes.
Wow.
So it's been a nice run. November, December, January, February, and here we are after a 4-month stretch or so without 90s. Looks like they start to come back here later on this week. As far as the average number of 90s that we get in each month, March only averages 1, but April averages 3, May 11, June 24, and in July, I mean, it's just like every day.
Month.
It's basically the entire month is 90 or hotter. So, we've got that to look forward to, right, Esme?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to turn our attention just briefly here to the wind, because with this heat, we're also going to be ushering more wind and also dry air. And some of this actually arrives tomorrow before we even get to 90s, although parts of the hill country may get into the 90s tomorrow. We've got a wind advisory for San Saba, Llano, Gillespie, and Mason County tomorrow from 1 to 8 in the afternoon and early evening. We could get some 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts, and at the same time, the air looks bone dry and gets drier through the afternoon. The relative humidity values drop into the single digits, perhaps low to mid-teens. But red flag warning is basically a term for fire weather. So when you've got a red flag warning, it's basically a fire weather warning, that you've got a combination of wind and dry air that's going to mean that any fire that develops could spread very quickly. Now, more than 90% of fires are started by humans, so this is a very preventable problem. Now, we can't prevent the wind or the dry air, but we can prevent any fires from starting in the first place and therefore spreading. So every red flag warning day especially, but every day, why not? You got to make sure you're disposing of smoking materials properly, as you should be doing every day, but also mitigating some of the things that can lead to sparks, like accidentally on the back of your truck, a chain that may connect your truck to something that you're towing. If that's dragging and starting sparks, that could cause a fire. Driving over tall grass with your car can start a fire. Improperly disposing of barbecuing coals could start a fire. There's a lot of ways that we can start fires, and I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but certainly until we get some significant rain, you've got to be even more careful than your carefulest self to make sure that you're not starting any sparks. Because look at the winds right now and through the night into tomorrow morning. The wind is out of the south. Now it's a breezy wind, gusting 15 to 25 miles per hour, but it is a more humid wind. And then we get a dry line and a cold front to come through tomorrow afternoon, and that dries our air out, and it brings much stronger winds to parts of the hill country where we could be gusting 35 to as much as 50 miles per hour at times. And then those wind gusts start to come down as we head into tomorrow evening. So it looks like the worst time tomorrow for wind and dry air is going to be mid-afternoon through mid-evening. It's not like the wind stops late tomorrow night, but it just won't be quite as dry, and the wind won't be quite as strong. So we've gone from fire and ice. That's been our topic here today, Esme, but concerned about the fire here and the fire danger as we go through not just Wednesday, but we could be looking at fire dangers coming back late Thursday and especially into Friday as a cold front comes in, Friday into Saturday. Wind picks up, drier air comes in. It is going to come with a cool down into the weekend. So as the wind settles and the temperatures drop, then the relative humidity is not as low. But still, Friday, Saturday may be our next concern for fire danger, and then again next Monday. And this is going to be the pattern until we can get some serious soaking rain, and also until the grass and the greenery and the shrubs and bushes start to green back up again. They're in this dormant stage right now, and I don't have a green thumb, but I know enough about plants to know that they haven't fully leafed out and bloomed yet, and so they're not full of the moisture that they would be, say, later in the spring. So that's why things are so dry right now.
Yeah, and with these temperatures getting hotter and hotter quicker in the year, that can also play a role into this type of
Yeah, I mean, the heat dries things out, especially when you don't have much humidity. And we're at the time of year where we're not getting a lot of very humid days either. It's basically some of the driest air of the year comes right now when we get the heat first, but we don't get the southerly flow that brings in enough moisture off the Gulf to really increase our humidity, at least not to the extent that we get it later in the spring and into the summer. So the air can get very dry, especially as these dry lines and cold fronts come through. And as a result of those frontal passages, it can get very windy, and it's a bad recipe because you get the combination of both happening at the same time and without much water in the ground and without much water in the plants and things too. They're very dry. So that's a lot of fuel for any fires that start. But if a fire doesn't start and we do our duty to prevent that, then it's just a windy, dry day without any fires, and that would be fine.
Yeah. Well, jumping back to the 90-degree days, when did we start to see these 90 degrees coming so soon in the year, and what is the reason behind it?
Yeah, so we dig into this a little bit in our blog on KXAN.com. I looked at the 30-year averages, which get updated every 10 years, to see how the average first 90-degree day has changed. And that date gets updated every 10 years, as I said, as the National Weather Service recalculates the 30-year average. So once they recalculate that average, and you can see some of those dates here, we've seen on average here over the last few decades, 90-degree days coming earlier and earlier. So back in the 30-year average from 1961 to 1990, the average first 90-degree day in Austin was April 14th. Then 10 years later, they recalculated the 30-year average again, so 1971 to 2000. And that average first 90-degree day was also April 14th. But then 10 years later, it ups to April 8th. 10 years later, it's now April 3rd. It wouldn't surprise me if the next time we recalculate the 30-year average, which would be in the year 2030, that then we start seeing the first 90-degree date happening in late March based on the trends that we've been seeing. Now, a lot of this is to do with climate change, of course. Some of it's to do with growth in the area, but it is not as big of a role as a lot of people would think, or people that don't really want to talk about climate change want to point it just on the growth. Because we're seeing this type of warming in places without growth. We're seeing this type of warming over the oceans where there is no growth, where there's no concrete and asphalt and things that would heat things up, and buildings and things. So yes, there's a minimal component of the growth of the area that's causing things to be a little hotter. Urban heat island effect is caused by buildings and concrete and asphalt in one area. But it doesn't account for the majority of the heating here in Central Texas or the world that is due to climate change. So now, not only have we seen the first 90-degree dates coming earlier now, and by the way, we've linked to the sources for this through climate.gov. They've got the IPCC report where scientists agree that climate change is causing this warming. But we also talk about in the blog how the number of 90-degree days each year is going up as well. So we mentioned that right now we've got 123 days on average of 90-degree temperatures or hotter in Austin at Camp Mabry. Well, back in the 30-year average from 1961 to 1990, it was just 107. So we've gone from 107 days of 90 or hotter now to 123. And that is a significant change. It's not just one or two extra days here and there. It's a noticeable increase in the number of 90-degree days. And of course, we've also seen an increase in the number of triple-digit days as well, although I don't have those numbers handy right now.
That's a couple weeks added to that 100 days.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference. And certainly heat, a significant killer every year as far as weather-related deaths are concerned. It's, I think, number one or number two. So when you're adding heat like this, it is not just an annoyance of a hot day, but
it's also unsafe.
It's unsafe, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we dig into that in the blog. We've got the sources there linked for those of you curious as well. But we also focus in on that, last freeze too, for those of you thinking about planting. Most of you should be okay, but if you're in the hill country, I still think you should wait. A lot of people actually have been messaging me on various social media lately when we were talking about, hey, don't plant yet. Monday might freeze. And then, of course, it did in some places. That Easter is the day that they wait to plant every year. Now, Easter changes. The date of Easter changes every year. Yeah. So it's not like it's a hard and fast rule, but it's a rule of thumb that people seem to want to stick to.
Yeah, I feel like when we talk about planting, it's always don't do it, or you're okay to do it, or don't do it. The temperatures are always changing.
Yeah, and, we're never going to get to the point until maybe we're in April where we're like, okay, no chance of freezes, right? But we're getting to feel pretty confident that the chances for a freeze in the metro and our eastern counties are very low going through the rest of March. And then April, it's so rare to have freezes. We haven't had any freezes in April since the 1920s in Austin. So it's been a long time since that happened. So it's not a never say never, but the later in March we go, the pretty unlikely it would be to have a freeze in Austin. Still thinking, though, we're not even at that average point yet for the hill country final freezes, and I'll pop up that map. That was March 20th. So we're still 9 days to go until the average final freeze in the hill country. So I certainly wouldn't plant yet in the hill country because of, we're not even past that average final freeze date yet. But the metro, eastern counties, I would be a little more confident in that potentially happening.
And in the last couple of days, not only has it not been freezing, but the temperatures are pretty low, but the wind was really strong, so it felt colder. So it felt like we need to take care of our plants or cover them, but it really wasn't freezing, right?
Well, it did freeze yesterday morning in the hill country. But you're right. We've had a noticeable breeze during the days, especially. There was a bit of a wind this morning. Wind can actually, while it may make it feel colder, it can actually keep our temperatures up at night because it mixes the air from higher up down to the ground. And on a clear night with light wind, that temperature may be colder down at the ground than a little higher up. But when you get that mixing wind, it can actually prevent temperatures from dropping as cold as they could without the wind. So the wind may make it feel colder for us humans, but it actually works to reduce freezing concerns on the clear and otherwise calm nights. So it's kind of an interesting fact there. The wind does double duty. It keeps the plants a little warmer, but it makes us feel colder.
Yes. Well, before we wrap things up,
Yeah.
can you kind of give us a look at whether we can expect for the rest of today or even the rest of the week?
Yeah, so we've got full sunshine out there right now, as you can see from our live Austonian weather camera, with temperatures today on their way into the 80s. As we sort of started talking about here, we've got a lot of heat on the way for the next few days, especially. 89 tomorrow, very close to being the first 90 of the year. That high of 89, though, tomorrow would be our hottest day of the year so far. Our previous hottest temperature was 87. So 89 tomorrow would be the new hottest day until Thursday, which would then be our newer hottest day of the year and our first 90-degree day of the year, which is why we started talking about all of this. And then 88 there on Friday. But as you can tell, from Friday to Saturday, cold front comes in, knocks temperatures down. The weekend looks nice. For those of you trying to get an early start in the pool, though, coolest days of the next 7 coming during the weekend is not exactly ideal for pool weather, but it does make it comfortable out and about. And we know we've got so many visitors in town for South by, and I think they'll be okay with the low 90s with low humidity. And then this weekend looks good. 79 Saturday, 77 Sunday. And then we start to heat back up again here Monday and Tuesday. And while we're talking about it, let me do this on the fly here. So let's hope I don't select the wrong map. But we were talking about our nighttime lows and whether we would have any additional freezes. Ignore that cold front. I still haven't had... wait, where's the map here? 4-7 night by night. This is what happens when I go off the cuff. Well, the next few nights, well above freezing. I think I had the map up here somewhere.
Very cold throughout the nighttime.
Yeah, we've got some chillier nights. Oh, here it is.
Oh,
there we go. So nighttime temperatures over the next week, 50s and 60s through Sunday morning. And then the only cooler morning is next Monday at 48. Obviously still not cold enough to freeze at that point. So this is sort of why we are feeling increasingly confident that we're not going to get any more freezes in the metro, at least, is because there's just absolutely no sign of 30s in the metro anytime soon. So the next 7 days would take us beyond the middle of March. So then the back half of March freezes incredibly unlikely. Even historically, we usually don't get many freezes in the second half of March. So that's what is leaning us to think that second half of March, pretty unlikely to get many freezes. But we've already had plenty, as we mentioned earlier, more than average since, say, November, 16 freezes versus an average winter getting 12. So we've had our share. And if we stop the freezes now, which we think in most places we have, then we would still have had more freezes than usual.
Well, we do have that article that you were talking about a little bit throughout this stream. It's titled First 90 Degrees of 2025 Possible This Week. Is that early? And we have some of these graphics that you shared today, right, in this article?
Yeah, just about all of the graphics about heat anyway are in the article. We didn't dive into the freezes in the article exactly, but we certainly talked about the warmth to come and whether 90-degree days this week would be early. And the answer, yes, is it's about 2.5 to 3 weeks early. So it's not even in that sort of week either side of average where you could consider it normal. It would be a little earlier than normal, but we also talk about why we've been seeing these 90s a little earlier than normal.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Nick, for sharing all of this with us. This live stream will live in that webpage that is on our website, kxan.com, and you can find it on the homepage. Where can anyone go to find you and your forecast later today?
Yeah, that's at kxan.com as well. And of course, we'll be on the air on KXAN News starting at 4. Freddie Bella's got you from 4 to 5, and then I'll join you starting at 5 o'clock.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thanks.